The new data coming out of the CDC is atrocious. It shows that our teen girls in particular, but our young people all across this country are just drowning in horror, sadness, despair, hopelessness, and suicidal thoughts. It's almost hard to believe this data. I mean, the CDC claims they collected it, but here's some of the highlights. Almost 6 out of 10 girls reported, teen girls, reported feeling persistently sad or hopeless, and about 1 in 3 seriously considered killing themselves. This is the latest data from 2021, released recently by the CDC. For boys, it wasn't quite as bad, but again, same trend, skyrocketing upwards. This all comes from the Youth Risk Behavior Survey that the CDC puts out. Now, I think this is a very dangerous survey. There's a lot of reasons. We've exposed it here at the Newman Report before. They ask really bizarre questions that kind of get kids thinking that it's normal to have multiple sexual partners and do a bunch of drugs and think about killing yourself. It kind of plants these seeds in their mind. But let's just give them the benefit of the doubt for a little bit and say that these are true. According to the CDC, this survey showed that teen girls are reporting the highest levels of sexual violence, sadness, and hopelessness that the agency has ever recorded. 3 out of every 5 girls are now reporting persistent sadness and hopelessness, and that figure is up 60% from just a decade ago. On the suicide front, there is some really alarming data as well. 30% of teen girls in America seriously considered suicide in 2021. Again, that's up almost 60% from just over a decade ago. More than 10%, actually 14% of girls have actually reported attempting suicide in 2021. So more than 1 out of 10 girls, that's a surge of more than 30% since these surveys began 10 years ago. On the sexual front, similar horrors. Almost 1 in 5 teen girls reported experiencing sexual violence just over the preceding year. That's up 20% from 2017. Also, more than 10% of teen girls reported having been forced to have sex. That's up more than 25% from 2 years ago. Folks, this is just absolutely incredible. Imagine more than 1 out of 10 teen girls being raped. Okay. More than 1 in 5 experiencing some sort of sexual violence, folks. This is out of control. It's crazy. The CDC's data shows that teens who identify as LGBTQ plus alphabet were even worse off than others. According to the CDC, almost half of all the LGBTQ plus identifying students seriously considered attempting suicide. Nearly 1 in 4 attempted suicide, and nearly 3 in 4 reported persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness, which goes along with other data, right? LGBTism is highly correlated with mental issues, right? And encouraging that seems like a bad idea, right? I compare it to, would you tell a girl who's anorexic or bulimic, would you entertain these delusions and say, no, honey, you really are terribly obese. We should go get you some liposuction, right? That would be cruel and unusual. And yet that's exactly what the CDC proposes doing to deal with this. They have all these proposed schemes. They say if we just have more LGBT propaganda in the schools, they'll feel more included. If we have more mental health services for the kids, read more handouts from taxpayers to the big pharmaceutical companies that brought you, for example, the COVID injections. If we have more extreme sex education to fill the minds of the children with sex thoughts and perversion and confusion, that'll help. And of course, they promote their suicide hotline that, as we've talked about here, actually encourages children to think about different genders and then refers them to the FreedomProject, one of the most grotesque organizations that you have probably never heard of. And so really, folks, the idea that doing more of the same is going to help these teenagers is absolutely insane, right? The reason the teens are in this situation is because we've been pumping their minds and their hearts and their souls full of godlessness, paganism, immorality, perversion, comprehensive sex education, radical Marxist indoctrination, materialism, under the guise of giving them an education in a public school. These are not an education. In fact, what they do is hurt children, as we see from the latest data, right? Adding more of this stuff would be like throwing fuel on a dumpster fire. Obviously, very few Americans still trust the CDC. These are the same shills for Big Pharma that got us into this big mess over the last 3 years. But folks, this madness is a new phenomenon. We need to understand this. Before the 1980s, kids didn't used to shoot each other. They didn't used to shoot themselves. They didn't used to kill themselves. They didn't used to rape each other, right? These things were practically unheard of in America before the 1980s. That's when the 10 Commandments were taken out and the sex ed went into overdrive. What these kids need is God, truth, and family, not more tax-funded perversion and evil shoved down their throat by the government. Parents, these pyromaniacs should not be posing as firemen. Get your children out of the schools, run from the burning building as quickly as you can, or your children are very likely to end up among these tragic statistics.